I'm here with Brian Knappenberger, director of the Internet's Own Boy. Brian, fantastic documentary. It's about Aaron Swartz and his life and everything he did up to the time of his death. You know, extraordinary, great insight. You know, tell me about how you became acquainted with Aaron and his story.
My previous film is called We Are Legion, the Story of the Hacktivists, which is about the kind of origins of the non-group Anonymous and where they came from. It was kind of a historical look. We went back to the 80s and kind of traced hacktivist and hacktivism. And I was on a panel in New York City about a week after Aaron died, and on the panel with me was Quinn Norton, who was an ex-girlfriend of Aaron's, and a couple other people knew him on the panel as well. And almost everybody in the audience where we were at this kind of social computing symposium knew Aaron and had a story about him. So this was right at the very beginning of a period in which there was this huge outpouring of frustration and anger and sympathy, real sympathy on the internet, including from people that didn't know him. And here I was among a whole group of people that did know him pretty well. And so I started filming, and I started getting their reactions and trying to understand the connection, very, very intense kind of personal connection people had with him. And that was the beginning of the film.
Wow. Because what's amazing is what your film captures is how indebted the internet is to Aaron. Mm-hmm. So much that he did, not just in the activist side, but also building the internet. He did Reddit. Mm-hmm. He did RSS. When you were talking to everybody and getting those sentiments, what were some of the feelings that they were expressing?
Well, yeah, Aaron's fingerprints are kind of all over the internet. He was involved in all kinds of things, and he was deeply engaged in these communities that were thinking a lot about the web, thinking a lot about free culture, and working, lots of these kind of working groups that were really building and these tools that were kind of facilitating the flow of information on the internet. And he was doing that from a very, very young age. I mean, really from 12, 13, 14, he was participating in these groups where there were people who were easily in their 30s or 40s, and of course they didn't know they were dealing with a 13 or 14-year-old, but that's one of the kind of unique aspects of the internet, right? On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, as the saying goes. But Aaron held his own pretty substantially in that community and became very respected. And so that's definitely a part of the film. We explore that early part of his life, this kind of natural inclination he has towards building these tools, this kind of very sort of pronounced ability that he has, this programming ability that he has.
Because I notice in the film that you start from his early years, and it really helps drive the film. It's shown how he did know what he was doing. You see him at these lectures, symposium. Here he is, 13 and a grown man, holding his own. And I can't see that you could have done it any other way. Was that just a driving force, start from the beginning and work to the end?
Yeah, I mean, basically in the film we tell the story of his life, and that is, on the one hand, a fairly simple and straightforward kind of story of one sort of deeply kind of impassioned individual. But what I think was so compelling for me about Aaron's story is that in telling his life story, was also able to kind of dig into all these other really interesting and complex and not just that, but really relevant issues for our time. So, that's one of the things that really I found compelling, is that sort of by telling the story of this individual, I could also get into these other areas that are complex, at least on the surface, but also that are so relevant to who we are and our current society, that we really, I thought that was important.
You're right. Yeah, because you interview, we.
Hey, Crown.
You interview his parents and his brothers, and they give deep insight into, the type of person he was early on.
Yeah.
You see him developing and growing. They said how interested he was in games and such. What kind of insight did that give you into him that enabled you to, get a glimpse into his early years for your film?
Well, I was very lucky that Aaron's family opened up to me in this film. I think it took a lot of courage on their part to do that. Obviously, this is a very difficult time for them. We made this film very quick. It was only a year after Aaron died, within a week or so, that we were actually screening it for audiences at Sundance. So that was I was interviewing people very close to the time in which they'd lost somebody that they loved deeply. And so, I admire the family's courage in talking to me. I took that as a huge responsibility to get the story right. But their insight told me who he was, really, in a way that nothing else really could have.
Right. And his friends, his work relationships. We have people who were with him when he started building these incredible programs. What insight did they give you into his work side of himself?
Right, the work side. I mean, I think one of the things that's so striking and so almost kind of funny in the early part of Aaron's life is that he's working with at the age of 13 or 14 with these people that are significant internet luminaries in their 30s and 40s at least. And they don't know he's young because honestly, the internet at its best is a kind of meritocracy, and he could certainly more than hold his own. And so one of the parts of the film that's kind of funny is this, when they kind of realize they're dealing with a 13-year-old kid. They say, oh, you should come out to one of these face-to-face meetings. And he has to say, well, I'm not sure my mom would let me. I'm only 13. I'm going to need a chaperone. And so that kind of shocks everybody that this colleague that they were working with was that young. So that I think defines some of the early working relationships that he was involved in. And then I think what defines his later work to me is just the depth of organizations, various advocacy groups and companies that he's involved with. We list them in the film, and it's not actually not even meant to be read. There's so many of them. We kind of just show the quantity of them, and that's pretty striking.
And one of the things I was amazed by is that he built a relationship with Tim Berners-Lee. One of the godfather of the internet. How was his insight into Aaron? Because there is a vast age difference in
between Tim.
Between them. Yeah.
So. Yeah, Aaron met Tim Berners-Lee at a very young age. Tim Berners-Lee said that they met on IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and that that a lot of the kind of free culture movement was infused with Aaron's energy. And I think that a lot of Tim Berners-Lee's energy and philosophy is infused in Aaron too. I mean, Aaron was, it seemed to me, inspired by him. Here's a guy, Tim Berners-Lee, who doesn't in any sense cash out, right? He gives away the World Wide Web for free. It's really the only way it would have worked, to start charging or trying to split up the internet into small kind of paywall and stuff. Would have meant we didn't have a World Wide Web, right? The innovation there is the linking, the connections between people that can be made, and the free flow of information that can happen. So I think that's something that obviously inspired Aaron, or was a kind of model for him. So I think that's essentially, I think there's a lot of kind of mutual influence happening there.
What's amazing to me is, the people who really seem to grasp the internet want a free internet, because one of the things that I remember was the creators of Excel. They didn't create a patent for it or anything. They just created it and gave it out. And here's, Tim Berners-Lee with that same mentality of a free internet. Here comes Aaron in a new generation, his advocacy of a free internet. You think that if he hadn't come along and really started pushing hard for a free internet, it would have been more restrictive, like it's becoming now, because he really pushed SOPA and he pushed all sorts of things for free internet.
Yeah, well, I think openness has been at the heart of the internet since the beginning. Tim Berners-Lee, again, gave away the web for free. He gave away his inventions, for free. He allowed that to be the sort of heart of the internet. And we all have benefited from that, including the economy and innovation and speech and all that has been really the result of its openness. And you see, that's why it's so important that the threat now that we face when former lead telecom chairman, lobbyist, is now the head of the FCC, and the notion that net neutrality, the neutrality of the internet, the openness, the fairness of the internet is now under threat. You really see, when you look back at the history, at people like Tim Berners-Lee, you really understand the threat that the internet faces now. When people like former lead, lobbyist for the telecom industry, Tom Wheeler, have net neutrality on their sites, and it looks like they want to kill it.
When we look at Aaron, towards the end of his life, we see that he was, pushing for the free internet, and what they were coming against him with in the process was him downloading free information. He was able to do this, and the amount of information, and that he wanted to give it away.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, was there big reason, the college and everything, to say, you know what, this is too much. How can you have too much of something that's free?
Yeah.
With your story, with your documentary and doing all your research, what's your opinion on that? Can you get into their side about what they might have been thinking?
Well, one of the interesting things about Aaron's story, I think, is his actions with JSTOR really bring up a lot of kind of critical things happening with information right now. And one of the reasons why it's so mysterious, and we look through it in the film, is because Aaron actually didn't do anything with the documents that he downloaded from JSTOR. He downloaded 4.7 million academic journal articles. So these are things like the 1860s Journal of Botany, things like that. And he downloaded this big sort of bulk kind of trove of these articles, and he actually didn't do any. He was arrested before he didn't release them. He didn't try to sell them. He didn't, as far as we know, he didn't really do any kind of data analysis on them. All things that people suspected he might be doing with those, but it is speculation because he didn't do anything with them as far as we know. So what does that mean? Is this illegal? Is what he did illegal? Most of the charges against him were about access to the documents. He ultimately had a superseding indictment against him, which were 13 charges, all of them potential felony convictions, obviously, and they were all about whether he had access to this database. Not about copyright, about whether he had access to the database. So access is a tricky question in our modern world, right? We all copy from multiple sites every single day just by downloading internet, and actually downloading a page is making a copy. So I think that's part of that story and the kind of complexities that arise from JSTOR and the JSTOR incident really are one of the reasons why I wanted to explore the film. It's really a kind of a core part of the film. What was he trying to do with those articles, and where do the boundaries of legality lie?
Any glimpse from your perspective of what he wanted to do with them? Did he want to create a library? Did he want to create, just an open access for anybody to get this, 1890 Journal of Botany?
Well, it's clear he was upset that a lot of this knowledge, which is often taxpayer funded, and some of it's in the public domain, was locked up behind paywalls that were highly restricted. I mean, you go to JSTOR, you go to Read Elsevier, you're paying a lot of money per article. So if you're downloading multiple articles, you're talking about, you can rack up the bill pretty quick. Clearly he was upset based on writings and things that he'd said before, that this material was being kind of locked away behind these paywalls. Lots of money was being charged for it, and it wasn't doing what research really should be doing, which is enriching our public discussion and politics and all that, and lawmaking, or even being not available to the developing world, right? So clearly he was upset about that. The other thing, it seems likely that he was doing with those articles, to me, and from talking to people, and again, this is all speculation, because he never did anything and we don't really know. But he told enough people, I think, in confidence that he wanted to look at those articles for evidence of corporate funding behind those articles that might have led to biased results, particularly in the field of climate change. That came up enough times among people that knew him. Not always, if people wanted to speculate on camera or on the record about that. One person in the film kind of does speculate a little bit about that, but that came up enough times. And looking at his past history of what he had done with other other databases that he had downloaded, I put some credibility into that he was kind of analyzing it for corporate kind of corruption, basically.
Oh, amazing, because you explore the charges against him, and then you explore what MIT, well, I wasn't say what did or didn't do.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because you look at different cases throughout the years, and you always wonder what is the genesis of them bringing charges. Yeah. And I think you're hitting it on the head that what did they not want him to find out, so they were trying to prevent. Was that kind of a theme you were, kind of exploring? Wish you could explore a little more?
Well, I mean, if you think about some of the things even the things that we just talked about in terms of analyzing research for possible corruption or for corporate influence, for the notion that taxpayer-funded research should be available to taxpayers. And by the way, is a part of this big treasure trove of some of the great minds of our world, analyzing some of the biggest questions of our world, that should be available to everybody, including people in the developing world. You're talking about very high-minded principles that I think most people would agree with. And yet, in a lot of ways, he's being lumped into this legal category of people who are just stealing credit cards for purely mercenary reasons. So that's the absurdity of our legal system when it comes to computer, quote-unquote, crime, right? This is the broadness and the absurdity of the laws, that they can be kind of applied to all these kind of different, obviously very different kinds of activity. So that's one thing I think his case brings into full relief.
Yeah, amazing. Wonderful answer. Because I brought up MIT in my last statement. It's curious that they didn't really do much, because MIT is known. Anyone who knows MIT, and you brought this up, they're the ones that push the gamut. They want you to think outside the box. Yeah. And here they are with the perfect opportunity to say, hey, he's thinking outside the box, yet they didn't do anything.
Yeah, MIT says that they remain neutral, which I think for a lot of people within MIT, and certainly alumni of MIT, really struck a lot of people as absurd, to be honest, and that MIT that fell a long way from what they could have, certainly what they could have done here, and what they have always been presumably about, which is, as you say, pushing the boundaries a little bit, experimenting. I mean, here's a campus in which people put fire trucks up on top of the dome. This is obviously illegal too. But putting a police car on top of the dome at MIT is illegal. Naming a bridge, based on somebody's name. Like how many.
yes.
How many people's, how long is this bridge based on somebody's body length?
Yeah.
There's a culture of pranks. Taking all the furniture out of somebody's office and gluing it upside down on one of the arches, and that's just the kind of the more notable pranks. But there's also a whole range of kind of technical pranks and general attitude that has always been a kind of point of pride at MIT, pushing the boundaries, understanding that a lot of times really innovation comes from a little bit of transgression. And so that's why it struck so many people as almost shameful that MIT didn't take a stand here. MIT is the perfect person to, with the perfect organization. MIT is the perfect organization that to have the moral authority to stand up and say, well, wait, what was he doing here? Should this have been illegal? Should this have been a felony, right? Which is what the prosecutors want. That they weren't going to budge on him being a felon. And MIT, JSTOR, by the way, the alleged victim in the crime, gave up all charges, right? Yeah. They walked away from it and said, we don't want to be a part of this anymore. So if that alleged victim walks away, drops any charges, MIT really becomes the only one with the moral authority to say, look, we don't think this is a problem either. And they didn't do that. They in their own minds, they remained neutral, which frankly helped the prosecutors.
Right. Now, if anyone to stand up who had the authority or be able to have the soapbox to say something would be them. Just a couple more questions. In the film, it's a beautiful film. You talk so much. Is there something in particular that you didn't see put in there or wish would have made it for some reason?
Well, I wish we would have had in the film the prosecutor's point of view. I really do wish they participated in the film. We tried very hard to get their perspective, and they just said no. They haven't really talked to anybody. But I wish they did. I mean, I tried. I would have put their perspective in the film. I would have played it straight. There was never a public trial, so we don't actually know what their case would have been. I mean, we know what the charges were. We can look at the indictment. We can look at some of the transcripts and stuff, but we don't know of the hearings. But there was never a public trial, so we don't actually know what their case would have been. I think we have a right to know what they were thinking in this case. They spent taxpayer money going after this kid. While, by the way, in the middle of its awful kind of economic downturn, in which almost nobody involved in the financial meltdown saw the inside of a courtroom, the fact that they're spending this much time and this much energy and this much focus on this kid who essentially checked too many books out of the library, I think we should know why exactly. And I'm curious about that. I wanted to know that, and they shut us down. But I think we still have a right to know.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes. In what one or two things would you like the audience to walk away with the film?
Well, I think the audience should walk away with a couple of things. First of all, our criminal justice system is broken. 97% of the people in our criminal justice system plea out, right? Only 3% go to trial. So it's absurd to think 97% of the people in our criminal justice system are guilty. That can't be true. Obviously, we've given prosecutors way too much power. Obviously, we've given them incentives only to notch new convictions on their belt. And this has created a problem in America. I mean, I hope it's a problem that in generations down the road we look back on and say, how did we ever get that bad? But the truth is, it's a big problem. 2.3 million people in jails and prisons in the United States, another 5 million in the control of the criminal justice system, probation or parole. That makes this the country with the highest rate of incarceration in the world, by far, not even close. Way ahead of countries in which we routinely criticize their human rights records. So that's one thing. Anger about the system, the notion that we can do better. A smarter use of technology is another thing I want people to walk away from. A smarter approach to our laws about technology. The kind of deep realization that technology and the technological world is not some distant realm of geeks and hackers. It's the world in which we live in, all of us. And there has to be a place for protest in it. There's obviously lots of different kinds of activity that are absurd to all kind of loop under the term hacking. And so we need to update and modernize some of these laws, like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But broadly speaking, I would also want people to walk away with the notion that whatever their skills are, they can use them for the public interest. This is something that certainly comes out from Aaron's story. He could have been in that startup world. We all know he could have been a multimillionaire, but he made a choice not to do that. He made a choice to turn from that and to go into public interest, to motivate people, to grassroots organizing, and to use these skills, these huge skills that he had, to try to do some good. But you don't have to be a child programming prodigy to do that. You have skills too.
Yes.
So you can put whatever your skills are into the public good too. So if people walk out of the movie theater, I hope they walk out thinking that too.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. Brian, thanks again. I appreciate it. Congratulations on the film, too.